Thank you. I'd like to start with a question for Amira. Frame this issue for us by explaining why this is why CX is a top priority for the administration and how the CAP goal team is approaching this.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Amira Boland. I'm with the Office of Evaluation Sciences at GSA, and I've had the privilege of getting to work on the customer experience CAP goal with Barbara, some of her colleagues from the VA, the U.S. Digital Services, and then some other folks from GSA who are all helping to coordinate this particular cross-agency priority goal. And I think you've already heard today about, just from the introduction to the event and from the congressman, that the excellence service is one of the three primary goals of the President's management agenda, along with, effectively delivering on agency missions and being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And so the cross-agency priority goal, for those of you who don't love to follow the Government Performance and Results Act, what cross-agency priority goals is provide a convening and focusing mechanism to help provide some accountability to tackle government-wide challenges that no single agency is ultimately responsible for, but something that we should all be working on together. And so we created this goal, and it includes strategies to improve the reliability and usability of critical digital services that the U.S. Digital Service is working on. It includes establishing government-wide customer experience metrics and also pulling together best practices from the private sector and other public sectors, whether it's local governments or state governments or other national governments that are making progress in this space, and creating capacity at the center to help provide resources and support to agencies that don't necessarily have mature customer experience organizations. And then finally, to institutionalize and create a sustainable memory of this organization. Sorry. Yeah. Or do you want me to, I can use my handheld one. Yeah. Thanks. This is better. Maybe this will work. We can pass it back and forth. Yeah, we don't need this sophisticated clip-on one. And so we've created some guidance in the A11 circular, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But that is, for those of you who don't love to follow government budgeting processes, that helps provide guidance to agencies on how to put together their budget and also to do program and performance measurement. So we've introduced a customer experience framework in that document as well.
Thank you. Barbara, obviously VA is doing some things right in this department.
We are doing some things right. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to the VA Digital Service team, which just won a Service to America medal last week. So that was great news. So tell us about your role as the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer and how your office came about.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's great to be here with all of you. Can you all hear me? No? Oh my gosh, okay. Sorry, it's probably me. Anytime I touch technology, it doesn't work. So I'm Barbara Morton, Deputy of the Veteran Experience Office at VA. I've been with VA personally for about 12 years, attorney by trade, don't hold it against me. Started in a group that adjudicated veterans' appeals. And so I saw firsthand from veterans the very frustrating experiences they would have in the appeals process. And so a couple of years ago, I was asked to join a new startup called the Veteran Experience Office. And as you probably may recall, this office was born out of a really challenging time for veterans and obviously for the department as well. April 2014, you may recall the Phoenix wait time event that happened. And so we had a new vision for the department after that happened. And sometimes I feel like a catalyst really helps people laser focus on change. I think that's true historically, probably true for yourselves in your own lives and organizations as well. So I was asked to come over, and what appealed to me was really kind of the two main pillars of the office, which are starting with industry best practices, trying to borrow those and bring them inside the four corners of government, number one. And number two, listen to and design around your customer. I truly believe that if we do those two things, we can't go wrong. So that was really kind of the impetus for me stepping into this role. I've been in it, as I said, for about 2 years. And I would say it's definitely a personal journey and also an organizational journey as well. VA has gone through a lot of maturation in this space over the last few years. We're really focusing on human-centered design up front, designing around your customer as a core principle, as well as real-time customer experience data, a lot of which is captured in the A11 if you've read that, some of those core principles as well. There's also a focus on technology in our space, as you mentioned, the SAMI Award, which I've been told is like the Oscars for federal government, so really exciting time. And just trying to give our veterans and their caregivers a better experience. Wanting to kind of model after industry and have that be the same, whatever channel folks are choosing to use, they should have those same expectations met in government. So I'm really privileged to be part of this awesome team. Thanks.
And I hope the audience appreciates the quick reaction to the technology issue we have here. We're all about audience experience.
Of course.
So metrics are critical to establish, to one, understand the problem you're trying to address, but also to measure your success in achieving your goals. Tell me about what should agencies do to know that they're measuring the right things and doing it well?
Sure. So in the A11 guidance, we actually took a piece of it to spell out how we could start to establish a structure and consistent potential benchmarks for measuring customer experience across government. And so this is fortunately an area where the private sector and even other governments have started to learn a lot about how best to collect feedback from customers. And there's an evidence base of which types of questions or what elements and components of measuring experience are connected to things like broader accountability and trust and getting what you need from a service provider. And so we went through a process of talking with teams at agencies like Barbara's that are already measuring things, talking with private sector organizations, both research organizations and companies to see what they're measuring, and then came to around 7 domains of elements of measuring customer experience, and have created questions for agencies to adopt, again, to help provide some efficiency and ease of adoption. And we believe that those measures are a great starting place to creating government-wide metrics.
Yeah, and if I can add to that as well, in addition to the A11 guidance, which hopefully, has everybody read that here? I hope everybody raises their hands. Okay. So really, I think guidance that's hopefully easy to follow, easy to understand. And I would also say, if you think about the continuum of an experience, you've got sort of the building and designing up front. So in addition to like understanding what the metrics are from the A11 and while the person's in the journey, you want to kind of think about human-centered design up front, right? What are those moments that matter most to the veteran, in my case, or a caregiver? And so what we practice at VA is really that upfront design piece. Outpatient experience is a perfect example for us. So we did some research in the field with veterans and their family members to understand what their journey was with VA and the hospitals. And so we created a journey map from that, highlighted the bright spots, the things we should keep doing, and some of the pain points or opportunities for improvement. We then measure our sort of performance in those moments that matter to veterans, which happen to align with at least one or more of those 7 domains that Amira outlined. So I think if you look at it on a continuum, again, the upfront piece and then the during for process improvement and revision of some of your practices, I think is a great way to approach.
Yeah, and you asked about making sure that you were measuring what was right for your service, and so we really wanted to provide flexibility for agencies understanding their own context and reality of the service that they were providing to kind of make it work for them and their reality. So the VA is providing health care, the National Park Service is providing an experience, the IRS is asking you to comply with something. And so those are very different customer experiences, but we tried to boil it up to what are things that are consistent at the transaction level. How is your engagement with a federal employee? Do you feel like you got what you needed? And are you overall confident in this organization that you're interacting with?
And I think just one more thing to add to that. I think one of the most exciting parts of the A11. Again, I think easily you could read it and say, oh, it's sort of a government document. But it was actually formulated with input from industry and from other agencies as well. So it was really a collaborative approach. It was sort of the common denominators amongst all of us in industry and government, and that's sort of what crystallized from that. So I think it's kind of a unique document in that way as well.
So is there a formula you use for investment in metrics compared to the entire customer experience problem? I mean, is there a rule of thumb? If you're embarking on a program of this scale, you need to set aside X percentage for surveys and that sort of thing?
So, I mean, from a VA perspective, I wouldn't land on a particular dollar amount. I mean, it could range, and it depends on how large or small you want to start. I think for me, general rule of thumb is when anyone's asking me, I don't even have this capability in my organization, where do I even start? My recommendation is always start with a journey map. There's some great resources out there from OPM, the Design Lab. It's actually designers who we started with at VA, to really help you understand what your customer's journey is like. And maybe, to the Congressman's point, thinking about data from your call centers, let's say that's a pain point for veterans, looking at your data and starting with that type of transaction and moving forward from there.
For a lot of organizations, they don't really get serious about customer experience until they have a crisis. For those agencies out there who maybe haven't experienced a crisis, what's your advice to them to get serious before they have one? Like, where do they start?
Well, I think one way that people in this room, because we heard some questions, there's folks from different agencies here, is that if you go to performance.gov/CX, we've actually started creating resources that we're putting there for anyone to pick up and use in the government. So the A11 guidance is specifically directed towards high impact service providers, which are federal entities that were selected based on number of customers that they touch or dollars spent, so sort of the sort of higher programs that you come to mind. But there's things like a self-assessment that we design that has general components of customer experience, and when you're thinking about setting up a program at your agency or even at your program level, or even if you're a customer experience representative that's answering the phone, it has some things to think about from sort of the initial point to a more mature model. And there's also a way to develop a template for an action plan, as well as a sample survey. So we're trying to provide resources along with this customer experience priority goal so that it's not just an ask of agencies, but also I think what's really unique about this is that there is a focus on providing a central government capacity to provide these resources to agencies so that it's more easy to adopt.
And I think just to add to that too, so the A11 is sort of a very concrete attempt to be sort of a strong driver to move us all in government in that direction. So in industry, obviously, if your customer's not happy, you're going out of business. When you think about government, I feel like a lot of times people who aren't familiar with customer experience think about, well, I'm going to have to be here anyway. This is a government job. I have a government mission. I've got a statute telling me what to do. And I think for us, having the A11 as a key driver to help us all think in a more holistic way is what's really important to get people jump-started in that way. And for me, I always tell people, I don't think it has to be an either or. So it doesn't have to be I focus on my operational metrics that I'm held accountable for, or I do this other thing called customer experience. It's really got to be an and. So I think that's what a very exciting sort of trigger for us all in the A11.
So can you give us some examples where a small investment in customer experience really had a significant payoff?
Sure, yeah. So in VA, I mentioned the outpatient surveys that we're doing. We have built over the last year an outpatient experience program. So it never existed before. Relatively small team of folks who have consulted with industry, Mayo Clinic, Beryl Institute, other industry leaders in patient experience, and also done human-centered design work up front, again, to map that outpatient experience journey, and then got together with partners across the administration, including VHA, to co-design certain tools, very concrete, tangible tools for employees to use to deliver better experiences. So a simple one is like a standard phone greeting. Veterans would tell us from our research, it's very hard to understand when I'm calling one of VA's 1,800 numbers. where I am or who I'm talking to. So we've worked with VHA to institute a standard phone greeting, simple greeting, 4 parts. Hello, my name is, how are you today, and here's where you're calling. Another piece of that program, what we heard from veterans as well, is that when they would go to a medical center, they would have a very hard time navigating the facilities. A lot of them are sort of Frankenstein buildings built on top of each other over many years. And so we instituted what's called a Red Coat Navigator program. That was a program that was in certain VA medical facilities, but it hadn't been scaled across all VA medical centers. So we've done that now where we have volunteers, we welcome them in the 4 corners of each medical center who actually help veterans navigate the facility. There's some trainings that we've offered as well on customer experience, and early results have shown us that veteran trust in VA has actually gone up in those facilities that have received training.
One small example, just to connect it to VA, that our team actually worked on, this is the Office of Evaluation Sciences, was the VA was sending out a communication to some veterans around an employment benefit and some counseling career services. And the email that they were sending said something like, the subject line was, you know, you could qualify for, or you might be able to receive this benefit. And looking at the veteran population and really understanding them and what motivates them and where they're at in their lives when they're thinking about this career benefit, our team actually just changed the wording to "you earned this benefit," because they did earn it. And that's obviously something that's very important to that population because they've served and now they've earned something. And so just that one change, it didn't cost anything. It just took, you know, an hour of thinking through, you know, where are these people in their journey when they're making this decision or getting this email. It actually increased the uptake of people accessing that benefit. So it actually opened up and increased accessibility by doing something that didn't require sophisticated technical talent. It didn't require, you know, a huge program investment, you know, or reorganizing anything. It was just changing the wording of a subject line.
That's a great example, and the kind of thing that is very easy for organizations to overlook when. So how do you create accountability in this area when so many people are responsible for so many different aspects of customer experience? How do you create a system that is accountable to the agency leadership, but also to the customers?
Well, from a VA perspective, again, I talked earlier about multiple drivers of customer experience in VA and in government at large. Obviously, having something like the A11 is sort of organizational accountability. We're holding ourselves as an organization, as a government, accountable for those metrics. I think there are other drivers within the agency, particularly my agency, that help us focus on that. So our secretary, new secretary, his #1 priority is customer experience. So he understands the value in it, not only with our customers, veterans, and their families, but also with each other as well. So having top leadership really drive that focus is also really important as well. The other thing that we're doing in VA, and this may sound a little wonky government, but with an organization as large as ours, we have to have some sort of governance infrastructure rather, to help us channel and hardwire the voice of the customer into decision making. Otherwise, you run the risk of having it be sort of a one-off in pockets. So we're establishing sort of a formal way for us to channel and hardwire that feedback, whether it's through HCD or real-time surveys, into business decision making. So there are multiple elements, multiple drivers, and I think cumulatively they're really helping us point in the right direction.
Yeah, and in the sort of government-wide perspective, I think that the public transparency focus of the A11 and of this administration of sharing the data on what folks are saying when they're responding to those 7 questions that the different service providers are asking them, that the goal is that all those high-impact service providers would share their data, and then that data is then published publicly on performance.gov.
So what kind of resources would you point people towards in whether they're experienced looking to take it to the next level or whether they're just starting out in customer experience? Do you want to start, Amira?
Okay, well, I mentioned earlier, we're starting to put things on performance.gov/CX. And for those of you inside of government, the OMB Max page that has our cross-agency priority goal on it will also have additional resources, case studies from other agencies, journey maps from other agencies, some cross-agency journey maps that we're working on, the self-assessment tool and the action plan template, and we'll also be putting, we're starting to work on the survey tool for agencies that don't already have a data collection method, and so resources for that and how to adapt that at your agency will also be on the OMB Max page.
Yeah, and I would say, again, from my experience, so I'm a pretty creative problem solver and a little bit of an unconventional thinker. So when I think about resources and how do I get started, where do I start, I've pulled on a number of resources in my career, just even before I joined the Veteran Experience Office, that really have helped me infuse the innovative sort of brain of industry into the business. So Presidential Innovation Fellows are a wonderful resource that I've utilized for years, and these are kind of, again, industry technologists coming into government, really making a difference for a period of about 2 years or so, and being able to deliver some great products. The second is the United States Digital Services team as well. Have worked with them for years, and again, these are the greatest, brightest minds in industry that want to come into government, a la Sammy Awards, to make some great contributions. So those are 2 resources that are really, really impactful in my experience. The other I mentioned before, design resources from the OPM lab. Again, we couldn't have gotten our jump start in VA without that support, so they've been a tremendous partner as well. Finally, I'll say for those, how many of you here are in government or from government? Okay, so a number of you. I'm happy to talk to any or all of you about our journey here at VA, and that's sort of an open door policy for me. All the lessons that I've learned, I would love to be able to share it with my sister agencies, no matter where you are on that span of a journey, whether it's the beginning, middle, or sort of maturing stages. So leave that for anybody who's open to that.
And we will, would like to take your questions. So if you have questions, please just raise your hand and someone will find a microphone.
Hi, I'm Jay Mazroff. Questions directed more or less to Ms. Boland because you're with OMB. I used to work for DOD, and one of the frustrating things, not only as a government employee, matter of fact, I was at a medical university, so we had medical students that, for example, would have to file travel vouchers. The problem under DOD, just from my perspective, when you have 20 some odd different systems that are trying to interface with another, it's not only a lack of efficiency, but it's certainly not cost effective. Does OMB have any type of what I call either political power or pressure on obviously on Congress and of course on the executive side to really drive home the point that not just only the Defense Department but other agencies, there has to be more what I call scales of economy and efficiency and have less systems? I wonder if you could address that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very valid concern. One of the tools that I immediately identified that would be helpful to agencies, in particular to the data collection efforts and the survey tool, because again, they would have different systems that are scheduling appointments or following up with patients or whatever, was having a centralized survey tool. And so there's actually a team at GSA that's starting to build out to think about, like, if you're familiar with the Digital Analytics Program, which is it's a service at GSA that's appropriated and available to all agencies to use that helps you create or collect website traffic and other sort of operational metrics. That's just a little piece of code that you can paste into your website, and then you can use the government-wide Google Analytics account to track your website metrics. And so that team is kind of looking at how could we provide a centralized tool like that, understanding that Paperwork Reduction Act can be a challenge to navigate, and also just the cost of acquiring a system and all of that. So that's certainly something that we recognize should be centralized.
But you ever see where it will be very few systems that a unilateral system that at least if you're under DOD, which has the heaviest usage of multiple systems. So the problem is when, let's say for example, you're transferring funds or you're paying a bill to recognize expenditure, and the two systems, I think they're called like legacy systems, they don't interface, then you have to rerun the transaction multiple times. That's a cost. That cost curve goes right through the roof, and people don't realize it. Not to mention the fact that it becomes more and more difficult to audit through the system. I wonder if you could address that, please.
I'm not sure exactly how to say sort of I think that so you're saying that the customer would be experiencing that as well as someone inside of government? Yeah, and so I think we're leaving it up to every agency to think through what are the best questions for them to be asking of their customers so that they could identify, frustrations like that. I know you guys have created an open text, free text field that you can then scan and mine for specific things like that.
Do we have any additional questions?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Numizu with Pacific Consulting Group, and we do support CX in both government and the private sector. One thing I would say in the private sector, sort of the arc of how CX is progressing is it's sort of right at that door of employee engagement and customer experience. It's a big deal, right? Because you can design, you can journey map, you can lay out technical requirements, and then you've got employees at different touch points. So how do you grapple with that? What's working?
That's a great question. So, and you hit on the yin and yang, right, of customer experience, employee experience. If I'm having a bad day, I can't give a great experience to my customer, right? So in the Veteran Experience Office, we've just started to kind of really focus on that. We sort of matured our external customer-facing capability. But a large part of what we do, I mentioned those tools that we build, the training, the red coats, all that is really mirrored with employees as well. But we're also kind of, when we do our journey map with the outpatient, we also did a parallel employee journey map. And we're going to start to kind of benchmark against both the customer journey and the employee journey. It certainly does take a little bit of time to sort of mature and stand up both capabilities, but that is definitely sort of on our roadmap, and fully agree with you. It's an exciting time when you have both of those capabilities equally mature to kind of see how we can improve both sides of that.
Any additional? Oh, we have one in the back.
And I'm not being paid to do this, but Ms. Morton, Chris Frechette from Verizon, my peer Judy Cottula and I had the opportunity on Friday to be up the VA Medical Center in Baltimore, and I want to tell you the red coat or the red carpet works. We were greeted upon entering the building, offered a flu shot if we wanted one.
We like to keep you healthy too.
Yes, I'm sure you did. We were greeted at the elevators to ensure where we wanted to go. We did meet with the Experience Office, and their challenges are many of that you say at the larger VA, at the hospital level. Yes. They have multiple ways that the customer journeys through their environment. Yep. And they are often the last result, yes. And the team of people that need to deal with them almost need to be between lawyers, social workers, and mediators. Jack and Jacqueline's of all trades. Okay. Yes. So the challenge that they have, and that you're probably familiar with this, is the tools that they need to be able to document, because their workload has become higher because you're starting to put out new surveys. Yes. To evaluate that, but you don't have the staff to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So in looking in that ways, I'm sure you're looking at a higher level to make an enterprise-wide decision, but you need something at the hospital. Mm-hmm. You talked about the outpatient. This was the inpatient as well. Yep. And I do want to tell you the veterans are behind you because they were there to greet us as well, and they said, we hope you're here to help. So whatever you can do to help them at the hospital level, the outpatient, the C-box is the tools that they need. Yep, agree. Great comment. Thanks for that. And I'm glad you enjoyed the red coats. I'm glad. So outpatient was just our beginning, and we chose outpatient largely because that's the greatest number of folks one of the greatest constituencies that we serve. So we are doing research right now, conducting it and finishing up on inpatient experience, emergency medicine. So we're literally going kind of by each individual journey. And what we'll do is we will stand up, we'll turn on the sort of real-time feedback capability while simultaneously building and delivering tools, tangible tools to employees based on customer insights and customer experience employee as well. So we'll tackle each one of these bit by bit. So it's, again, we're starting, the train's on the tracks, running down the tracks, and we're excited to tackle more. But appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? While we're waiting for that, I have a question. Sure. How critical is it that you have dedicated staff whose sole focus is customer experience?
I think we probably will have the same answer. It's absolutely imperative. I can speak for myself, and if I can I tell a quick story? Just
Please.
A quick story. So one of the experiences I had at my previous job at VA at the Board of Veterans Appeals was a veteran who was like 95 years old, World War II veteran, got my phone number, called me. Don't know how he got my number because it wasn't listed, but I was very happy he found me. And he was wondering about where his appeal was. And so I took down his name and number, said I would get back to him. Turns out that his appeals file had kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, so it took a while for me to track it down. But at the end of every week, every Friday, I would call him or email him and sort of give him an update. So finally, a couple weeks later, I was excited to give him a phone call and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, found your file, here's where it is, it's going to be shepherded through to my group, just wanted to let you know. And at that time, he gave me seriously the greatest compliment of my entire life. And that was, he said, Barbara, thank you so much for helping me. I trust you because I know you would take care of me. And that, to me, is what is so motivating and inspiring. That's why this is a mission for me. It's not a job. And so I'm around many, many people in my orbit, Amira, many other people who have that same passion and same drive to put customer experience at the forefront. And to have a dedicated team like we do here at VA is just, it's made everything possible. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you very much.